Hello and welcome. This is Alchemist X. I took a little bit of time off because last week didn't really have anything that I thought was worth talking about. Kind of a filler week. This next week, however, is going to be the opposite of that. There's Halloween stuff, new memento for Helene, class change for Meifang, race to level 20 for Neka. Definitely some good stuff there. I'm going to talk about that, though, in more detail in the next video, which is going to be the more typical banner overview. This video is going to be more of a, you could think of it as a guide, some advice, etc. for people that are newer to the game. Because I got a comment from someone who is recently started playing JP, and I thought that was a really good question about tier lists and resources. So in the description of this video, I'll put some links for the different sites that I use. I mean, of course, alchemistcodedb.com is always the MVP there for a ton of information and like the images that I use to make the tier lists that are going to be showcased later in the video. But of course, the wiki is still good to have sometimes too. Really, really good for anything that it would, like an English/global relevant version would still apply to JP, just references for certain bosses, that kind of thing. But I wanted to give some advice about just starting out, like how to approach the game when you are just, you know, a brand new player, and like where to go, what to go for, etc. So let's go ahead and jump into that. So the first thing is to reroll or not to reroll. It's always an option to just take what you get and just run with it. If you're a little more picky, I definitely think, depending on what banners are available, if you have... I started during the anniversary and they were giving away 20k gems, so it made a lot of sense to just do this one really good banner and then reroll based on the results. I ended up doing that. It took me about three rerolls to get to a situation that I was happy with the units that I had, and then got to start with Narrow, Nimble, and Zaphyrus on top of that. That was definitely a really good case scenario. If you're not as fortunate in that case, you don't have this one amazing banner, something like a pickup banner or a choose your own banner would make really good reroll fodder. You might have to reroll more times, but I would recommend any dragon unit or any V2 unit. Now, the V2 unit is going to come with some conditions, but for the content that you need to clear first, just them at level 60 will be just fine. And then once you are settled on that, the first thing that you want to do is join an alchemy port, ideally one that has max soul ports, so you can start taking whatever units you started with, you know, whatever banner you chose to spend your initial gems on, or whatever you get from the free new player banners. And just start getting shards of them right away, especially the characters whose shards can't be farmed any other way. And once you got that settled, next thing to do is get the 5 free characters, the Gerald, Natalie, Zahar, Spica, etc. You get them, you get their normal pool memento, and you get enough to max them out, so that's just like a really, really good head start. That can carry you through the next important thing, which is to get through Chapter 5 of the main story. This is important because that is the point at which unlocks EX hard quests. It'll be very, very likely that by the time you finish Chapter 5, you'll have characters who would benefit from farming the EX quests. So just the quicker you can do that, the less shards that you miss out on for that. Then once that's taken care of, I would take that time to focus on like Babel Chronicles, Sacred Stones, the stuff that's permanent content. Babel Chronicles is important because you need to do them for protagonist job 3 equips. There are certain characters have certain Babel Chronicles where you need to get all the milestones. For that, I would recommend just going on YouTube and finding a guide, because some of those Babel Chronicles are very, very, very specific in the actions that you need to take. Not my favorite gameplay mode, but it's not too bad. Like, beating it is fairly easy, but getting every single milestone might require a guide. And hopefully there's not too many issues. I know there's one with the Desert Babel where because they gave job pluses to Noin and Zeba, that really messed up that last stage because like it made them tougher. Hopefully that's all been ironed out. I haven't heard anything too crazy about that anytime recently though. So, and then Sacred Stones is important because for characters that have job pluses there, you need to get the stuff so they can be strong enough to clear their Sacred Stones class change quests, which is something I'll talk about a little bit more later. And then clearing the Tower of Veda is another really important thing as far as permanent content goes. Just because you're going to want to clear the tower on a regular basis, because the Veda coins are going to be useful for protagonist job 3s once again. And while we're on the subject of that, as far as which protagonist to go for first, I would recommend Dios. While he's not nearly as strong as his version 2 or several other dark characters now, he's still fairly solid in his own right. And then you just need him to be really strong in order to clear the main story, because there's a pretty significant difficulty spike in chapter 7 of the main story, and that requires you to use Dios. You also are going to need to use Amane. I know it's a lot to ask to go for 2 protagonist job 3s at the same time, so you go Dios first, Amane second. But you can mitigate that somewhat with certain like cover units, that kind of thing. So my Amane still doesn't have her job 3, and I've gotten almost all the way through chapter 7. And then after that, you should be strong enough to focus on time limited content like clearing EX levels. You might not be strong enough to clear everything like hell levels, that'll come with time. But at that point you can just focus on whatever is relevant, say like Genesis is rerunning, which it's about to soon. Focus on that, any box events, etc. And once you've reached this point, you'll have been playing for a little bit, because you're not going to clear, unless you do nothing else, you're not going to clear all that stuff I listed, right away. You'll have been playing long enough that you'll have gone through all like the free summons, new player stuff, so you should have a pretty decent roster as far as which units you've gotten, combination of normal pool and limited. So you'd have an idea of where your strengths and weaknesses are in terms of elements and in terms of role, because it's very unlikely that that's going to happen on an even, like a perfectly normal distribution. What's more likely is you might be a little overstacked in one element, a little understacked in another. Like just for me, one of the reasons I chose to use my raising of Mercea as the video footage for this was because I have been really lacking in wind for pretty much since I started playing the game. It's just been this noticeable trend that I've just, I got Naju, and he was kind of my only like wind carry unit for a while. I ended up getting into the manual PvP mode where you get the coins that you used to buy Rega, just because there was an option to get another wind unit that way. So getting Mercea is definitely very, very nice to have to help balance that out. And just that can affect long-term goals, like what role or what element do I want to go for in the future, if you're not just going for characters that you like, which is definitely a viable thing to do too. But generally speaking, even when you're going for characters that you like, you'll still have secondary goals that you'll want to fill just to help the characters that you like either survive or do more damage, etc. So yeah, that is about all I've got to say in terms of just the general advice for people that are starting recently. So next up, we're going to move into the different classifications of units and my overall opinions of them. It's kind of the closest thing to a tier list, but I definitely want to stress just one more time that I don't think comprehensive tier lists are helpful, just because there's so many things like level of investment, mementos, etc. Like if a unit has to have all 7 gates maxed and there are 2 mementos that are both limited in order to be just like a super broken unit, like that's really good. Like you could definitely make use of them if you're in a position to, but that's a really difficult spot to get to. So sometimes it's better to have a character who has less of a ceiling, but it's a lot easier to get to their floor. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these slides. Okay, so to start with, we are going to take a look at the units that have been released since I started playing about 9 months ago in JP, and just look at ease of obtaining. So in this case, 20 step, that is going to apply to version 2 units. And they're newer, so they're not going to be as likely to appear on a selector banner. Now, you could still get them via pickup banners, but that's a whole other thing. You can't guarantee them with a pickup banner, though. And then 5-step unlimited. In this case, you would just transmute them. Louis was a 9-step unit, and he's probably going to be obtainable on cheaper banners nonetheless. Probably same thing for Azami. And then that could be obtained via selector. These units have been around long enough that, like, for example, the most recent celebration thing that gave selectors, you could have gotten one of these units for free. And then Venus is already free. Next up is the ease of use immediately after obtaining. So the top row, I think just right out the gate, you could use them under leveled as long as you have some kind of damage mitigation going on, that just whatever they provide, be it a dragon aura or massive debuffing or getting rid of dragon auras, that utility by itself is, even if they're underinvested, they could still help you out quite a bit. Now, version 2 units are going to take the most work because, especially for the Sacred Stone and later, you really want them to be level 75, so 150 shards, so you can start the Soul Link process. You know, they won't be nearly as strong as when you max limit break them, but my Dios version 2 is not max limit broken yet, and he does just fine. So definitely don't think that you need to get 385 shards of them to make them usable, but it might be a little bit of a stretch between 0 to 150 depending on how many shards you're able to get. And then for once a lot of gates, that is pretty self-explanatory. These units were designed to be released with all of their gates, and you ideally want to get as many as you can. Although in the case of Azami, honestly, she probably could have gone in the usable after obtaining if you're just using her for debuffs and you have ways to keep her alive. And then in the case of Louis, he's a special case just because the main story gives you 150 shards of him for free, and then he also has a Phantom Manifestation level, get 100 Enlightenment shards that way, and then he's new enough to have 100 shards for free, just getting him to level 60. So he's just an excellent crossroads of a lot of really good things that make him easy to get a running start. And then finally we have a memento analysis. So for needs 1 memento, it's like their memento does something, either the VCR or the memento itself, like vision clear or max limit break bonus, does something that just really helps them. If they're a damaging unit, it increases their damage. If they are a support unit, it gives them extra utility, or like in the case of Surzik, an extra cover move. They really want their mementos. Now, it works fine without mementos. Like, everybody wants their mementos, right? But at least for them, they do something really specific, like debuffing or dragon aura, so you can still do that and the lack of memento won't hinder you. And then Dios could be in the needs 2 mementos, but I put him in the free memento just because just getting him, he's a memento unit, so you have one of the 2 already taken care of automatically, so I figured those 2 things canceled each other out. And then Louis also a memento unit, and then Venus's you just get from the event. So yeah, that is it for the analysis of the most recent units, and we'll take this kind of framework of how we look at the units and apply it to a much bigger group of units. Okay, so let's get into some comparisons. So the framing here is that we are separating the units into different categories, so we're comparing apples to apples, such as Dragon units, version 2s, EX quest characters, limited characters with no EX quest, etc. So first category is going to be the easiest. That is because I don't think there's a tier list for dragons. They're all good. You should try to get as many of them as you can. Definitely high priority for things like selectors or banners. Next up is the V2. I don't think that there's a bad V2 unit, just varying levels of how long does it take to get them going. And then for the ones that don't have level 75 soul linking, that is going to take longer to get them going, but you will get a good unit out of it eventually. Then we get to the point where we do start to have to like separating them out, because after dragons, after version 2s, like those would be the ideal choice if you're going to spend gems, like especially a lot of gems to get a character. Or if you're given a selector or doing a banner with a selector, you definitely want to prioritize them. But then after that, either because you've got those needs taken care of already, or because the scope of whatever you're getting is more limited, these characters would be the next ones to look at, just because you don't have the advantage of a once a day quest for their shards. So getting them is going to be a little bit more difficult. Then to raise them, you almost certainly will need to have them be taking up a space in the soul port, and that's competition for like with dragon units and with V2 units. So determining who is worthwhile in the soul port, it's definitely worth taking a look at. So I didn't really delineate in terms of roles, just there's damage dealers, support units. Units that I think will do really well either because they are an excellent debuffer like Riza, a disruptor like Surzik, or just being Andex. Sometimes their roles can change, like Inaku makes a really good support unit at low investment, and then at high investment he can be a damage dealer that also can support. And the characters at the bottom, I don't think any of them are really terrible. There's some of them like Minario who just need a lot. Like he's got 2 mementos, and then I don't think you would be as happy with him fully invested as you would with Ravenna or Louis. Unless you are specifically in an anti-magic context, but that's just so specific, and that's like so expensive for how specific it is. Like that's generally why I put the characters at the bottom down there. Then we get 2 units that do have an EX quest, so bit of an advantage here just because you can just passively farm their shards even if you're not terribly interested in them. I even farm Rochelle's shards, and I really don't like Rochelle. Just if I have an EX character, I do it because it doesn't cost that much AP, it doesn't cost that many skip tickets, and if there's ever a case where I decide I absolutely need a character, then I'll have shards at my disposal. So this is more of a worth your elemental / rainbow shards kind of tier list. I definitely wouldn't recommend spending too many gems to try to get these characters. It's more of a who do you happen to get, who do you maybe put on a pickup banner, like pick your own kind of thing, if you've already got dragons and V2s taken care of, or if they're otherwise not available. And then let's take a look at some units to keep an eye out on, because with the alter class system, characters with older job pluses are starting to get new ones and giving them a new lease on life, like looking at Zahar, Chloe, etc. More recently, Corvus, Neka, Itsuki. So this group of units, they all have a job plus, and some of them are old, some of them are new, but none of them have alter class stuff yet. So if any of these units are units that you really like, maybe you use them in global, it's definitely worth farming them just in case. You don't have to invest in them if you don't have them raised at all, but you never know. If their alter class gets announced and you already have a stockpile of shards, then all the better. And then finally, we get to just a classification of free units. I did make one mistake here. Soul was actually supposed to go in the EX quest characters, but I accidentally put him here because I was sorting them by like their job plus quest, and like in my brain that got priority over his type of accessible unit that he was. He does have a Templar job plus from the Templar quest line, but he is not a free unit in the same way that the other Templars are, with a 3 times a day quest where you could eventually transmute them. The story quests, you'll get them automatically, and they are very, very worthwhile in terms of getting their job 3s. It just will take a long time. I talked about that a little bit more earlier. And then the Sacred Stones, they are going to be really, really good to have, especially because they are getting version 2s. So you want to have a fully enlightened version 1 just to get ready for that version 2. And then I just put some notable free units at the bottom here that you can get. In the case of the Rathers trio, only 1 out of the 3 is going to be free if you haven't done the April Fool's event for that. That should rerun eventually. But otherwise, the rest of these units are all more unconditionally free, either via quest, or you might have to do some PvP to get some coins in the case of Rega. But otherwise, definitely worthwhile, or at least potentially worthwhile to have. So yeah, that is about all I've got for my kind of pseudo tier lists and just general advice for new players. Hopefully this was helpful. And then next video, we're going to take a look at the banners and the Halloween stuff. So with that, I will wish you good luck and see you all next time.